Let's get started. I am really excited to talk about cold calling today. And the promise that I gave you when you signed up was, hey, give me an hour, I'll eliminate your fear of the phones. And I'll do my very best to do that today. And I thought a really great place to get started before we dig in is yes, the call will be recorded. All right. And number two, we will send it out afterwards. There's a whole like slide deck that I have here. I'll send all that stuff out afterward. The only other thing, because we have a ton of people and I'm running this solo on my side. I want to answer as many questions as possible. So if you have a specific question related to the content, use the Q&A button here in Zoom and I'll do my best to answer it. Okay. So I'm going to do this workshop style. I want this to be as interactive as possible. I'll introduce kind of the concept here in a second. I'll talk about the masterclass series that we're doing, talk a little bit more about myself, but I always like to start with a little bit of engagement. And I would love for you to share in the chat the idea of an invisible script. It's this idea that in society, I'll give you an example here in the United States. When I was in middle school, it was not uh, if you are going to college, it is where are you going to college? The assumption is that we go to school to get a white collar job. And if you're Asian like me, it was medical field, lawyer, etc. The safe fields. It was definitely not sales. But invisible scripts apply in sales too, right? So our prospects, our buyers, they have invisible scripts about salespeople and what they think of them. So I would love for you in the chat, what are some of the invisible scripts that you think your buyers have about being cold called? What is some of the internal dialogue that they have? What has society trained them to think of salespeople and people that make cold calls? Help me out in the chat here. Yeah, it's annoying. It's a waste of time. I don't take cold calls. You'd be surprised how many sales leaders I have cold called that said they don't take cold calls. And I'm like, dude, I'm like, this is what you're asking your team to do. It's absolutely crazy. Yeah, I don't trust cold callers. Yeah, how'd you get my number? It's annoying. Yeah, send me an email. It's frustrating. All of those things. So the thing I want you to have in the back of your head today is that your buyer has all of this baggage from the hundreds or thousands of interactions that they have had with salespeople. And it's not just in a B2B context. It's the salespeople they run across at the stores that they go to, that they get randomly cold called from. It's the spammers, it's the scammers, all of those stuff. They bring all of that baggage into that single interaction they have with you when they say hello. So let's keep that in the back of our head. I think it's really important to have empathy for the buyer and where they're coming from. So before we get into the content today, what you might also be thinking is, hey, using the phone, making outbound calls like this, like really, are we still doing this in 2026? Does this still work? And what I'm here to tell you based on the work that we've done with some really awesome companies, 250 of them actually in the last 5 years, companies like Shopify, Zoom, Gong, Rippling, etc., is that there is a big delta between the people that are average on the phone versus people that are excellent on the phone. So the top 25% of reps, they book 3.8 times more meetings than average reps. And this is what their performance looks like. So this is a study of 300 million cold calls that Gong did in partnership with our boys over there at 30 MPC, 30 Minutes to President's Club. And what they found is there's a pretty big delta between average and top 25%. It's an even wider delta between average and top 10% of reps. But you can see that top 25% reps connect with more buyers on the phone. So they get more people to answer. And there's some workflow things that they do around connect rates. They book more meetings. And you can see they get more of those meetings to show. Yeah, Johnny says that. Yeah, that's a big difference. You don't realize that meeting show rate would be that much different. Yes, absolutely. I mean, imagine the effort that it takes to even get someone on the phone, let alone book a meeting, and then the average rep for only 56% of them to show up. That's a pretty rough calendar. So in today's training, what I want to walk you through is the delta. How can we close that gap between average and top 25% or top 10%? So before we get into this, this is a three-part series called Outbound Masterclass. All right. We actually have a free course coming out on the 30th. So this Thursday, I literally sat in a studio here in Seattle where I live for 6 or 7 hours. We came away with about 3 hours of content recorded professionally in a studio. It is our absolute best stuff that we've done with companies like iHeartMedia, Shopify, Optimizely, companies that we've gotten some really excellent results with. All right. And you can grab that at masterclass.outbound.squad.com. I'll drop this into the chat too. So I would go grab it. It doesn't go live until Thursday, so you're not going to get immediate access to it, but this will put you on the list and get you in the community so that you're one of the first people to grab it. So I just dropped it into the chat. Today we're talking cold calling. Tomorrow I'm going to talk objection handling. And then Thursday, I'm going to give an overview of all of the content that we're going to cover, like literally everything that you need to book meetings in 2026. So today's session, I'm going to give you a 3-step framework. I'm going to give you some creative openers to make sure that you don't get hung up on in the first 30 seconds. I'm going to teach you how to ask engaging questions that make sure that we anchor to pain and that we get the buyer to show up. All right. If y'all cool with this, I want to get to some of the tactics here. So give me a good to go or a thumbs up in the chat. Are you alive? Are you there? You ready to rock and roll? Okay, and I'm going to clear out the Q&A real quick. All right, dude, let's rock and roll. So let's talk first around where you might be getting stuck. So there are some common things, and I really believe this in sales. In sales in general, but specifically cold calling, we do things during the call that make us appear as someone that we are not. We are not telemarketers. We're not spammers, right? We're not trying to get someone to buy something from us right there on the phone, in most cases, at least, for probably most of you, right? And we're selling a product, hopefully, or a service or a solution that you really believe in. And oftentimes we do things within the first 30 seconds of meeting someone where we just make a really poor impression, right? And we give prospects the ick. So one of those things is desperation. I didn't come up with this, but there's an old saying around commission breath. And for anyone that's seen the movie Super Troopers, which I'm a huge fan of, Super Troopers, there's this line where the chief of police and the head of the sheriff, I think, or I guess the sheriff or the county police or whatever it is, there's a line there where they say desperation is a stinky cologne. And at sales, we call that commission breath. Okay. So if you come into that call being like, oh shit, someone finally picked up, I have to get a meeting with them to hit my target this month or this quarter, you're going to give them the ick because you create this emotional burden for the prospect, very similar to seeing someone at an open mic who's just bombing in front of everyone and like you feel bad for them and it kind of makes you just want to leave. Like we don't want to create that emotional burden for the buyer. Two, we don't want to waste their time. We cannot show up unprepared and ask lazy questions like, what's keeping you up at night or what's your biggest challenge? Okay. Third thing that gives buyers the ick on a cold call is sounding like a sales rep instead of a respectable peer. So we're going to talk today about the language that you use. Sounding like a respectable peer is someone that really engages them around the mutual language that we share with the buyer. That's their problems, right? So what makes them want to engage is we have to show authority, that we can be trusted, that we know our stuff. We have to show social proof. There's safety in numbers. We do this through customer stories. And then what we like to call sales riz at Outbound Squad. You're confident, but you're also respectful. Okay. So one more note on tonality, and then I want to dig into the 3-part framework. For some reason, a lot of us, I didn't really come from a large corporate company, so I didn't have this, and I actually come from the contracting industry. One of my first jobs was going door to door selling house painting services, and I did that for a construction company in college. I got to run my own business, and then I worked up the ranks through them and became like a VP of sales. I was in a head of marketing role for a while. And I didn't come from this place where people had corporate speak. And for some reason, a lot of us, let me know if this resonates with you in the chat. When we talk to buyers, we become a different human being that starts to talk in a register like this. And we say, "Hey, how's it going?" When we get, and we just talk in a way that if our friends or family heard us, they would be like, "Who are you, dude?" So we got to make sure that we are not transforming into a different human. We're not being corporate. Yeah, Karen, we're not using teacher voice, no corporate speak, no uptunes, none of that kind of stuff. We have to be conversational. And most importantly, we really need to be ourselves. Okay. So none of what I'm about to show you is going to work that well unless we have the right mindset going into the call and we have great tonality. And I think the best advice I could give you on tonality is to just be yourself, dude. Don't feel like you have to be someone else to impress the person that you're about to talk to. Okay. So let's talk about controlling the conversation. So there's a few really key parts in here that are important. The first 30 to 60 seconds is essential that you nail. Okay. The average cold call only lasts about 80 seconds. That is not enough time to book a meeting. So, how you conduct yourself in that first 15 to 30 seconds is very, very important. Only 10% of calls last longer than 2 minutes. And again, it's really hard to book a meeting that fast. You really need a call that's going to be 5, 7 minutes plus. So, it's all about the intro. So, the framework I'm going to teach you right now, it's intro, hook, and close. Intro, hook, close. Our goal in the intro is to make a world-class first impression. Just like when we're meeting someone in person for the first time, we got a big smile on our face. Our body language shows that we're excited to meet them. Uh, we want to make a world-class first impression. The second part that we're going to talk about is the hook. So we need to align to a problem by using great questions. That's going to build the problem that we can attach to that ultimately becomes the reason for them to meet with us. And then lastly, close, secure the meeting and make sure that they show up. So let's talk about the first part, the intro. There are a lot of philosophies on how to properly start the call. This is a philosophy. This is not the only method that works, but this is the one that we have found that works the best. I'm going to give you a bunch of examples of this, and we'll kind of do this workshop style too, where I'll have you guys type in some examples, and I'll hopefully be able to give you a little bit of coaching and feedback. So the intro. We're very big fans of what's referred to as a permission-based opener. You might hear me say PBO, permission-based opener. The idea here is that the prospect did not ask you to call them. By definition, a cold call, regardless of how much you've researched, and I know people like to say a warm call or a smart call or I make hot calls or whatever it is, to the buyer, it's still a cold call. They didn't ask you to call them. They didn't sign up and say, call me to set up a meeting. They didn't do any of that kind of stuff. You're calling them randomly and they didn't ask you to do that. It's a cold call. So, one of the best ways to navigate that first 30 seconds is to do a simple permission based opener. And one of those might sound like this. Hey, Dave, it's Jason. Looks like you just made a big hiring push in Italy and France. Do you have a minute to hear why I'm calling you specifically? All right. We want to avoid formalities or niceties in your intro, get straight to the point. So, what you're seeing on the left, that's data points from that same study 300 million cold calls with Gong and 30 MPC. Asking, did I catch you at a bad time has a 2% success rate. Asking the buyer how they're going. And I'll make some exceptions. Some of you can get away with doing some of this stuff because you just are awesome and you fit into a 1% of rep that can get away with doing a lot of things that are not by the book. Most of us, including myself, need to really follow the best practices. So asking how's it going, I would recommend against doing. Unless you are selling into the South, maybe where like manners and all of that kind of stuff is really important, and it might be rude not to ask someone how their day is going. We're not going to ask how they're going. Okay. Permission-based openers and the heard the name tossed around opener, which I'm going to give you some examples of here in a minute. Those are the highest converting openers. So before I give you some examples, another common mistake. Let me grab the slides here. Another common mistake that I see oftentimes is doing what I call the double or the triple clutch. So what do you want to avoid doing at the beginning is I'm not going to ask for their name. So if I'm calling Nina, I'm not going to say, hey, is this Nina? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to assume that the person I'm calling is the right person, and then I'm going to invite them to correct me if they're not. Okay. So I'm not going to waste any of that real estate. I'm going to get straight to the point. Yes, Scott, always assume it's the right person. The double and triple clutch sounds like this. Hey, Dave, how's it going? Good. Who is this? Hey, it's Jason from Outbound Squad. I'm calling for XYZ reason. Can I get a minute to chat with you? Yes, that's a double clutch. I asked two questions that really delivered zero value to the buyer in the first 30 seconds. I don't want to do that. I've even heard people do the how's it going? Hey, I know I caught you at a bad time, but you got a couple minutes. Yeah, I got a couple minutes. Well, hey, here's what I do. Do you think it'd be okay if I shared more with you? Yeah, it's like you're asking three questions that just don't deliver any value. Okay. So we don't want to double or triple clutch. So here's what that looks like in action. Okay. There's four or five different frameworks that I like to teach. One's called the classic. This is the one I've probably used the longest, but honestly, I see the least amount of success with nowadays because people are just getting called so much, and this one is kind of generic, but it might sound like this. Um, Hey Dave, it's Jason. I know you weren't expecting my call. Do you mind if I take a quick moment to share why I called you specifically? So if you're doing SMB, let's say, and you're not having to talk to as many, enterprise style buyers that are expecting you to like really do your research and all of that kind of stuff, this could work really well. Okay. So it's the straightforward, classic, permission-based opener. Okay. A lot of you are asking questions and they're great questions. If you could do it in the Q&A, just because I'm running this solo, there's like 500 people on the call right now. It'll help me keep track of the questions a little bit better. So if you guys could drop them into the Q&A, if you have a question, that would be great. All right. And here's how you can get a little bit more creative with the opener. I've heard a lot of reps do stuff like this. Hey, Jason, it's CJ. This is a cold call. You can totally hang up on me if this isn't relevant. Want to roll the dice. I've heard reps use this one a lot. It's not personally my style, and you need like to put your personality into this one if you want it to work. But that's another one that could work pretty well. Okay. All right. Now we're starting to get into some of my favorite ones. So this one's called front loading relevance. So the idea here is that before you introduce yourself, you're going to explain the reason for the call. Okay. So before you introduce yourself, you're going to explain the reason for the call. Okay. So I'm going to add in some sort of personalization or trigger that is relevant to that person or their company. And then I'm going to introduce myself. And it might look something like this. Hey, Tim, I was calling about the recent launch of ABC product. It's Jason with Outbound Squad. Do you have a minute? I promise to be brief. All right, so I'm going to open with the relevant trigger or something about that company, and we're going to use that. Okay. Yeah, call says, yeah, I love front load because it quickly addresses the prospect's question, why are you calling me and why is this relevant to me? Yeah, 100%. Okay. So the next line of these, and then I can answer some questions about the permission-based opener. Our guy Armand Farouk over at 30 Minutes to President's Club, he really popularized this "Have you heard our name tossed around" opener, which I really like. We've kind of riffed on it, and I'll give you some variations of it that you can use that work really effectively. If you sell something that is localized in nature, so if you're selling sled, um, so that's like state, local, I think education, state, local education. So that's like cities, municipalities, all of that kind of stuff. The other thing that it can work really well too is like, we worked with a company that sells to contractors and they might be calling like, specific contractors in Seattle, let's say. Like you can localize it and it's really cool. So this one might sound like this. Hey, Jason, we work with a few other house painters here in Seattle, like ABC Painters. It's Josh with XYZ Construction Pros. Have you heard our name tossed around? So what you can see in here that's really cool is that we are naming the category or the industry or niche, which is house painters in this example. We're using geography. And then I name dropped another company in that area. This one is so good. The thing I love about this too is you don't need to customize it for every prospect that you call. So you could call into all of the prospects in the state of Oregon or Washington or California or like in the Bay Area, let's say, because California is kind of big. If you're calling it in New York, maybe it's folks in the city or in Brooklyn, whatever it might be. I can cater this and kind of do it in mass across a segment, and it feels customized to them, right? This one I call JBay's opener. So this is context plus social proof plus problem. So this is the one that I personally like to use when I'm making cold calls. And this might sound something like this. Hey, Katie, I was reaching out about the AEs you're hiring and the self-sourcing that they're being asked to do. It's Jason over at Outbound Squad. We work with sales teams like Shopify, Rippling, and Gong to get their AEs self-sourcing. Do you got a minute to hear why I'm reaching out to you specifically? Right. So what I did there is I put the context into the call. I dropped some social proof and companies that we work with, along with a short problem statement, and then I did my permission-based opener. Right. So that's a really effective one as well. So we're getting a lot of great questions in the Q&A. There's a way that you guys can vote for them too. So give a thumbs up, you guys, because I probably won't be able to get to all the questions by the end. Give a thumbs up on the ones that you really want me to answer, and I'll try to get to as many of those as I can. Last but not least, I want to give you two openers for folks that in the chat. Just type the word "me" in the chat if you are cross-selling or upselling into the existing customer base. Type the word "me" into the chat if you're cross-selling or upselling into the existing customer base. Yeah, a lot of you. Interesting stat that I found from a company called Iconic, who invests. So they're a PE firm that invests in a bunch of software companies. They just released a big study. I have a post going out. I think it should have went out either later today or tomorrow. And it talked about the win rate on account managers and customer success folks that self-source opportunities. The win rate's like 52%. So for you account executives also that you're managing an existing book of business, your win rate is obviously going to be much higher across the existing customer base than the rest. So going outbound into your existing customer base, like this is what it's all about in 2026. Like you have to be able to multi-thread around your main point of contact. So this one I really like. Hey Jason, it's Clara over at XYZ Company. We're working with Ryan over in the Seesaw team on reducing downtime. Do you got a quick minute? This is a super easy one to use, right? It's first name, last name. Here's who I am with the company. I'm going to name drop a person and a department that we're already working with. And that can be really effective as well. There's another cross-selling opener that I really like. So this one's a little bit more detailed, but you could say something like, hey, Bindu, it's Jason with XYZ Company. I'm your conversation optimization specialist. I work directly with Ryan on the checkout experience. We haven't connected yet with the web team, and I wanted to introduce myself. Do you got a quick minute? So I've come up with a title there, right? Conversation optimization specialist, which feels kind of long now that I'm saying it out loud. Working with Ryan on the checkout experience. So I'm working with so and so on this specific thing. We haven't connected yet with your team. Do you got a minute? All right. So before we keep moving, we just went through the classic PBO, front loading relevance. We've talked about Armand Farouk's opener. We've talked about my opener. And then I've given you a few openers that you can use into the existing customer base. I would love to hear from you in the chat. Which one of these openers did you enjoy the most? Which one could you see yourself using immediately after this call? Let me know in the chat. Yeah, front loading. Yeah, number five. Yeah, number five's a great one. Yeah, Jody, I would definitely encourage you. Jody says I use the classic, but want to try the rest. Yeah, I would definitely encourage you to try some. And for those of you asking, yes, I will send out the slides for this after so that we have it. Yeah, so Johnny said which is the best one to try first? Um, Dude, I really like the front load relevance. I think is a pretty easy one to implement. You will have to customize it each time. So if you're doing enterprise or strategic outreach where you do need to find a reason to meet with them and do a little bit of research, this one's super easy because you just say, "Hi, Johnny. I'm reaching out because I saw this trigger. I'm with XYZ company. You got a minute, promise to be brief." That's a really straightforward one to implement. And then Armand's opener is a really easy one too. So you're not going to have to change that opener every time that you use it. So that's the best place that I would suggest getting started. Okay. Okay, I want to address some things before we keep moving around connect rates because a bunch of you guys have been asking. And let me reshare this slide. Let's go back to that slide that I had up with the connect rates on it. Okay, so there's a couple things because I don't have content in this deck on connect rates, and a lot of you are asking, so I wanted to make sure to address it. There is a data component to connect rates, and there is a workflow component to connect rates. So what you see here on the screen, when you see, oh wow, an average rep has a 5.4% connect rate, so that's the number of calls that they make versus prospects that pick up and say hello, versus a top rep at 13.3%. What the heck are they doing differently? There's a couple things. So if we just focus on the workflow first, workflow is you should be running reports either in Outreach, Gong Engage, Sales Loft, Zoom Info Engage, whatever you use for your sales engagement platform or dialer, where you make calls from, you can run reports that show you pickup rates by day and by time. Almost every single time, what I see is that when teams are making calls, they tend to prioritize the times that they make calls when the pickup rates are the lowest instead of doing vice versa. And oftentimes, what you'll find is that 8 to 9 a.m., first thing for the prospect in their time zone, is going to have the highest pickup rate. The second thing that I would try is like Mondays, people tend not to make calls because, they assume the prospect's loaded with meetings and, why would they pick up, right? Like, why would they pick up the phone if they have meetings all day, right? And then they don't call on Fridays because they're like, well, if I call on a Friday, they could have like a really long week and be really stressed out, and they're not going to want to meet with me. Like those are the days when sales reps are calling them the least. A third technique that you can try that's really effective for someone that you're having a heck of a time reaching is 5 minutes before the end of the hour. And oftentimes you can catch people bouncing around between the meetings if you call them 5 minutes or like at the hour or right at the top of the hour. That's a really good one too. Okay, so the second thing, I've talked workflow. Let's also talk about like the actual data. So there's a couple of things that you can do with data, and this really depends on if you're a rep or a sales leader or someone in ops or enablement that has a little bit more control over the solutions that you guys use. There are a few things data-wise that you can do to make sure pickup rates are the highest. So one of them would be making sure that you're calling cell phones. Zoom Info, any data provider is going to have cell phones. Like I do not call a prospect that does not have a cell phone. I'm not going to call into any generic lines. I'm not going to call into any of that kind of stuff. Like you need to be dialing direct dials into cell phones. The second thing, this is a more advanced thing that's a little tougher to set up, is you can set up caller ID. So this is something to talk to like to your ops team. You can set up a caller ID to where like when a person sees your number pop up on their phone, they also see your name and company name. You can get a couple pickup rate points that way as well. That's pretty cool. The next thing is to use a solution that will help soft dial and find the prospects that are most likely to pick up. There's a couple different ways to do this. So if you're using something like an Orem, let's say, so Orem is a dialer. Orem has had millions of calls go through their system, and it's likely that the person you're trying to get a hold of, other people have already attempted to get a hold of. And they have a feature called hot numbers. So with hot numbers, what's kind of cool is it'll leverage AI to prioritize the numbers in your list that have the highest pickup rate. That's something that's pretty cool. So you could get a 10% plus pickup rate doing that. The other thing you can do is use a solution called Titan X. I'm not sponsored, by the way, by either of these solutions, but I would recommend checking them out. So Orm's a great one. Titan X, who I've seen someone recommend in the chat there, is a really great solution. I've personally used it. What's really cool is like you just give them a list and say, hey, here's 1,000 people that we want to get a hold of. Find me the two or 300 that have a 30% plus pickup rate. So essentially, what you're doing is you're saying, I'm not going to waste all of this effort, this dead effort, calling people that are not going to pick up the phone. In an hour, I talked to um, 10 out of 30 dials. I connected with 10 folks. I had a 33% connect rate, 10 executives. These were VPs of sales and CROs. That was my experience twice. 30% plus pickup rate. So Titan X can be a really great solution to check out as well. Cool. So that's my stuff on pickup rate. I hope some of that was helpful. Now let's get back to our cold calls. So I gave you the permission-based openers. So the idea here again, if we're backtracking on the framework, is this intro. We want to make a great first impression. We do our permission-based opener, and what that allows us to do now is what I call a reverse pitch. A reverse pitch is critical for this next part because what's going to happen, uh, you're going to do your permission-based opener. You're going to say something like, hey, I saw that you guys are hiring in France and Italy right now. Not sure if you're running into compliance issues where HR leaders normally get bogged down, but my name's Jason. Can I get a minute to share the reason for my call? And they say yes. They're going to hand you the microphone. And then what you're going to be really tempted to do is say, awesome, I can pitch my solution now. I don't want you to pitch your solution. I actually want you to pitch the problem instead. Okay. And this is the part where you demonstrate social proof that you've worked with people like them. And this is also where you demonstrate authority. Okay. When you demonstrate authority, what you're demonstrating here is that I talk to people like you. All right. When we do this using problem based language, this little graph that you see here on the right, that's that same study of 300 million plus cold calls. When we use problem based language versus buzzwords and talking about our platform, the conversion rate into a meeting almost triples. Okay. So what this is going to look like is something like this. Prospect says, yes. Hey, great. I'm calling you because, again, I saw you just launched XYZ product. Fortinet was in a similar position when we were working with their team, and they're running into two challenges. One was cost control and margin protection. So they wanted a way to avoid tool sprawl as they grew new product lines, like the one you're doing with ABC product. The second thing was just making sure that growth was predictable. They wanted to grow MRR without adding complexity and then also reducing churn and making sure that they could forecast accurately and with confidence. How does that compare to your world? How does that compare to what you're seeing at XYZ company? The thing that makes this, so I'm going to give you the hack, is you need the buyer, the prospect, to feel like you've been a fly on the wall in their internal meetings. How do you do that? Most of you, I would assume, have calls that are being recorded, right? You have calls that are being recorded, sales calls. You can pull all of those transcripts. You can drop it into Perplexity, ChatGPT. Claude is what is really hot these days. I don't know about with their 4.7 update, but we'll see what the future of Claude is here in the next month or two, at least with sales professionals. You can drop all of those transcripts in there and have it pull patterns around the problems, and you're going to use those problem statements. So Melissa Martinez, you said, hey, can we get examples without a trigger? Yeah, you could say, hey, I was giving you a call because I speak with a lot of, and you can just insert their job title. Hey, I was giving you a call because I speak with a lot of cybersecurity leaders like yourself. And here are the two problems that we hear. And your problem statements are going to be a little bit more generic because it's not going to be something specific that you found out about them. But you can do that one in mass as well. Yeah, Dylan. Um, great. So this is the reverse pitch. All right. This part's super, super important. We need to nail the problem-based language there. And when we do that, you should get a response that's like, yeah, yeah, sure. Who are you guys with again? What do you do? And now they're leaning in and asking you questions. Okay. All right, and let me just look at the Q&A and make sure we've answered a bunch of these. I just want to make sure there isn't anything relevant to what we're talking about right now. Okay, cool. So you also might be thinking, hey, Jason, if I use something like that, it feels a little long. Okay. Gong study, again, they found that in cold calls that landed a meeting, the successful cold calls had up to 37-second monologues, both from the buyer and the seller. Okay. So your cold calls are 50% more successful when they use these monologues. The key is that one, get permission, and two, don't make the monologue about you and your company. Make the monologue around the insight and the thing that you were seeing in the field. Yeah, this is where teaching your team's business acumen is paramount. Can they connect the personalization they're seeing, relevant problem to what they're trying to solve? Yes. And let me know, is it Cole or Call? I know we've had a lot of interaction via LinkedIn, and I never thought about how to pronounce your name, dude. So let me know if I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Cole. Okay, perfect. Cole. Thank you, Cole. Okay, let's move to the next part of the call. So we've talked about the intro. Okay, that's probably half the battle right there. It's just getting past the first 30 seconds. Let me know in the chat, how can you tell if someone really knows what they're talking about around a topic that you're really interested in? Like for me, that's like anything related to Van Halen. I'm really into classic rock and Eddie Van Halen specifically. So like guitar, recently really into Muay Thai. I've been getting into sewing actually too, which has been kind of fun. I don't know if anyone here sews, but I've been learning how to hem my own pants, which is like really fun. Um, But yeah, so enthusiasm and confidence, their vocabulary, do they ask the right questions? Yeah, Jackie says no filler or thought words. Yes. Steady pace, Michelle says. Yeah, confidence without jargon. So many great things. Okay. So this middle part of the call, the goal really is to ask questions. And if you've ever been taught in your life that there's no such thing as a stupid question, that does not apply to sales. There are stupid questions. You can ask questions that immediately tip the buyer off that you are not only a salesperson, because we don't need to hide from that, but you're a salesperson that doesn't know anything about their world. And statistically, Gong did a big study of B2B exec buyers. And when surveyed, they said they felt that 91% of the sellers that they interacted with knew nothing about them, their company, or their role and what they do or care about. Isn't that crazy? So your buyer's experience is that 9 out of the 10 peers of yours that they interact with, they feel like don't even know anything about them or their business. It's crazy, right? It's absolutely crazy. So the next part of the framework, the hook, is we got to be really good at asking questions and aligning to what the buyer cares about. Okay. So here's where you might be getting stuck. Bad questions. From our purview, a bad question is one that requires the prospect to put someone down. So to basically talk shit about someone on their team or about a peer or colleague, to admit weakness, so to reveal a very personal problem to you about them when you're a complete stranger, or a question that just shows that, hey, you really don't know anything about me. Yeah, Colton Gray says never call their baby ugly. Yeah, there's like, this is the art part of sales. There's an art to asking great questions. Okay. And I know I've shared a lot of data today, but logic is just the start. You have to be able to execute this stuff, and this, in my opinion, is what cannot be replaced by AI. By the way, AI will never be able to. Well, I don't want to say never. Actually, who knows these days with AI? At least right now, the difference between you and AI is your ability to empathize with the buyer. Right? It's your ability to empathize. Richmond says, "Want to smell something weird?" That would be a really weird question to ask in the call, but I like where your head's at, Richmond. Um, so I like to avoid questions that start with "What don't you like about?" or "What's your biggest challenge?" in the first 60 seconds of meeting someone. Okay, like we don't want to freaking go for the jugular the first 60 seconds. Okay, so what we need to do instead, like great questions, it shows them that hey, we know your world. We get the prospect telling stories. We get them to open up. Okay, and we can say things that help us displace the problem. Okay. So instead of saying something that makes them feel alone in the problem, we want them to feel as if they are sharing a problem that all of their peers are also experiencing. Okay, so hey, we usually hear from XYZs that they run into this problem. How's that compare to you? Right? What happened the last time you decided to do this thing? Right? We want them to share, hopefully, what feels like a peer experience. So let me give you some examples of what that looks like and sounds like, okay? So these are the money question frameworks. One, this is my favorite one if you sell software. It's the user point of view. If I was that person on your team, how would I do something that I know that you can't do? Okay. Hey, if I was in charge of global expansion on your HR team, how would I know which countries are compliant and which ones aren't? So I'm putting myself in the shoes of the buyer, and I'm going to ask the question from the point of view of someone on their team. All right, this is a really cool one. If you nail this one, this will really get them to like stop and think. They'll, and hopefully, what you're looking for here is, well, we don't really have a great way to do that. The second one's a spotlight question. So this is kind of an age-old formula for asking the buyer how to do something that you know that they really cannot do without your solution. So this might sound something like this. This is for a company we work with that sells like an enterprise financial planning tool. So you might say, I'm really curious. And by the way, you can front load these questions with statements to soften them. Hey, I'm really curious. Or you might say something like, hey, you've probably already put a lot of thought into this, but I'm curious, how do you connect your P&L to the logistics side of the business so that if you needed to, you could get immediate insights? So I'm curious. You've probably already thought about this. This might not even be something that you're worried about right now. Right? There's a lot of ways that you can soften the approach. I always think of my dad, if I'm being honest. My dad can get a little triggered. He's like I'm half white. So I'm half Chinese, half white. My mom is she's an immigrant. She's from Hong Kong. And my dad's he's a white guy. He's a big 6'4" white guy that was in the Marines. And he could be really just when you present a new idea to him, he might take it the wrong way if you don't assume that, hey, he's maybe already thought about it, especially if it's something that he does for work, let's say, right? And a lot of the buyers that I interact with, I find are kind of like my dad, right? So, like, just assuming that they've already figured it out when he asks the question, if you're going to assume anything, that would be a really great thing to assume. And then it invites them to correct you. That's what I really love about this technique. Okay. So, a couple more frameworks. I call this the pervasive problem. So, think about, is there a problem that is just like industry wide that is rampant that everyone you talk to is likely running into and doesn't really have a great solve for? So I worked with a company that sells an automated welding solution. I use this example a ton because I just love what they did. Um, every buyer that they reach out to in manufacturing and operations has a talent shortage of welders. And there's a raw material shortage, Rahuna. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Um, But yeah, no one wants to get into blue collar trades right now. Like, look at all of you. You guys, all of us here sit behind a computer all day doing our jobs, or we're out in person meeting with people. Like, we're doing a white collar job. And they really struggle to find welders because there just aren't as many young people that want to get into the trades right now. It's a big problem that we have in the United States, at least. So the question sounds something like this. Uh, Hey, we're seeing that it's really challenging to find welding talent right now. And many organizations are struggling to fill that gap with automation. How does that resonate with you? Or how does that compare to what you're seeing at ABC Company? Right? In Akela, we will share the recording and the slides you'll get afterward too. Tell me a story. This is the last framework. I really like this. So, what happened the last time you ran into this problem? We talk about customer stories a lot and using them as a sales professional, but rarely do we talk about getting the customer to tell us a story. One of the most important lessons that I learned very early on in my sales career is that people buy based on emotion and they justify with logic. It doesn't totally work like in that way, but the reminder there is that sometimes we try to sell the logical reasons why someone should do something. Oh, the stats say this. Here's what the data says. Here's a customer story. It's like sometimes we forget that there's a very emotional part, even in large, complex B2B sales. It's actually, in fact, maybe more emotional because there's so much at stake for these folks politically in their organization. The emotion is what drives the action. And you get emotion through stories. You don't get it through facts and figures. It's the story around the facts and figures, and especially if you can get them to tell a story. So you might ask something like, "Hey, what happened the last time leadership needed an updated revenue projection?" I'm curious, like, how quickly does that take for your team to turn around? Right. So again, think about something that you know that they struggle to do and get them to tell you a story around it. Right. Yeah. Johnny says my girlfriend's a welder. Jody, she loves the job. That's awesome, Johnny. Okay. Cool. Let's keep moving. I think we got about 10 minutes left. I want to make sure to get through all the content. So we've talked intro, hook, close. Once we get to the close, we know it's time to transition to the close when we get the prospect talking about a problem. As soon as they've shared a problem that we know our solution can help with, we're going to cut the call short. We're going to suggest next steps because we just called them in the middle of the day. We promised it wouldn't take much of their time. Let's honor that commitment and promise that we gave. Okay. So, oops, let me go back this way. There we go. So the close, there's two parts to this. Step one is I'm going to summarize and share a customer story. So just summarize what you heard. Hey, sounds like the team is spending a lot of time on system maintenance and you want them to be more strategic. Blah, 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 right? So I was using the welding example, it'd be like, hey, sounds like the team is having a heck of a time recruiting welding talent right now. And you're looking for automation, especially those like traditionally hard to automate larger parts like your trailer hitches and that sort of stuff. Then I tie it to a quick customer story. This is exactly what we helped XYZ company with. Here's the result that we got them. It's two sentences. Customer story. And then the assumptive close. I don't ask if they want to meet. I lead them into scheduling. Hey, do you have your calendar handy? The next best step is to schedule a quick call with my AE, Tom, who can show you how other teams are tackling this. How's tomorrow at 2 p.m. PT? Right? Have your calendar handy. I like that one. The other question I like too that's kind of stops them in their tracks a bit is I'll say, hey, can I make a quick suggestion? And they'll say, yeah, what's up? Hey, let's schedule some time to meet tomorrow with my account executive, Tom, who does XYZ. Um, so yeah, Christine, you asked a great question. You said, what do you all say instead of AE? It's very much internal language. Yeah, so you can do all kinds of things. So this is called selling the blind date. So if I was doing this for that welding solution, I'd say something like this. Hey, the next best step is to set you up with our expert, Tom. Tom's actually been in the game for about a decade, and he's recently worked with Caterpillar on a very similar issue. And he'll be able to talk about how companies like that are dealing with the welder shortage right now and how they're automating some of these traditionally kind of hard to automate parts. So I'm selling the blind date. I'm selling the expertise of the person they're going to be meeting with, whether that is you, your account executive, an SE, whatever it might be. Okay. Lastly, I'm going to triple confirm. This is super important to get the prospect to show up to the meeting. I want to confirm that they accepted the calendar invite on the call because it could go to spam, right? So I'm going to say, hey, Lane, I just sent you an invite for 2 p.m. tomorrow. Would you mind doing me a quick favor? I want to make sure it didn't go to spam and that it hits your calendar. Could you accept that calendar invite real quick just to make sure you got it? Awesome. Again, the agenda here. Here's what we're going to talk about. And if I had to set it more than a day out, I'll tell them how I'm going to confirm the meeting, whether via text, via email, and or both. Okay, last but not least, voicemails. Should you leave them? Yes. Do they work? Yes. Your email reply rates increase by 3.24x when you leave voicemails. The thinking here is that if I have a multi-channel approach like this here, if I'm just making calls or just sending emails or just sending emails, not making calls, like, dude, I'm leaving like 2/3 of the meetings I could be booking on the table. So it has to be multi-channel. The key here is don't ask for a call back when you leave a voicemail. Ask them to look at the email that you just sent. It's lower friction. Okay. The other reason why you should leave a voicemail is that your subsequent pickup rate, your future pickup rate, will increase by 25.8% when you leave a voicemail. So it's going to triple your email reply rate and it will increase your future pickup rate and the likelihood that someone picks up the next time you call them by 25.8%. Okay. So here's what that framework looks like. It's relevance plus a problem or social proof and then a CTA. So it might look something like this. And by the way, I don't know where the slide is, but a lot of you are talking about AI gatekeepers. So let's say that the Apple gatekeeper picks up, you have 5 words. Usually what I will share is my name and then the trigger. Okay. So what I might say before leaving the voicemail, if it says, hey, who are you and why you're calling? I'll say Jason, patient diversity. And then as soon as the voicemail goes through, I'll say, hey, I saw the focus on patient diversity. And I imagine patient recruiting has got to be a focus right now. I was just looking at your company and had a few ideas on how XYZ company is recruiting more diverse patient group. I sent you an email with a few ideas. The subject line's patient diversity. Again, the subject line's patient diversity. It's Jason. So I'm doing something that is less friction than calling me back. So again, that framework for the iOS screener or Google Voice, I get up to 5 words. It's my first name and then the reason for my call, the trigger. There's a mini voicemail framework as well, and that's relevance plus call to action. So I'm not going to share anything about why I'm calling. I'm just going to say, hey, I was calling about the FAPI study. I just sent you an email with the subject line FAPI study. It's Jason. Take a look at that. So I'm like purposely vague with this one. Okay, because we got a few minutes left, we got 5 minutes. That's my content for today. Make sure to check out the Outbound Masterclass. Okay, it's Masterclass, and I'll type this into the chat again. It is masterclass.outboundsquad.com. That's where you're going to get access to the course. Tomorrow, I'm going to be doing a live session on objection handling. Then we got one more live session on Thursday. And I want to give you guys a sneak peek of what's in the course. And again, the course it's free. It's my best stuff. You guys, I spent 6 hours in a studio. We walked away with 3 hours of course content. I'm going to show you what that looks like here real quick. And then I'll see if I can answer as many questions as possible. So this is the page that I just dropped into the chat. Make sure to check it out. What you can see in here, these are all the modules. Like we did a part of this module today. There's a bunch of other really great shit for you to check out. The other thing would be, and this is almost done. I've actually just got a few tweaks I need to make to it today. The workbook is not a Word document or a Google Doc. The workbook is an interactive workbook. So all of the modules here, like you'll get like a user and login that you can set up that like summarizes this. It's interactive too. So it'll have like the summaries of all the key ideas. And then it'll be like, hey, define your ICP. Cool. Is it a software company? Is it a tech company? What's the sweet spot size of the company? What's their revenue band? What are their tech stack requirements? You can build your personas in here. There's a way to build messaging. I mean, this is just really, really cool stuff that we've built there. So make sure to check this out. And again, that's masterclass.outboundsquad.com. All right, and we have like 2 or 3 minutes. So what I'm gonna do here is two things, you guys. Give me just a second. I'm gonna share a link to the slides so that you can grab it. All right. So there's like 500 of you on this call, so you're not going to all be able to grab it at the same time, but I want you guys to have immediate access to this. So those are the slides there in the chat. Okay, so let's see if I can answer a question or two. Let me see if there's anything here in the Q&A that would be good for me to answer, and then we got to hop here. Okay, so um, yeah, Cole says any techniques for creating separation mentally from associating yourself to the outcome exclusively. What I really like to do is break apart the goal. So instead of the goal being to book a meeting, I like to think about something that's more under my control, making the calls, doing the activity, exercising, going to the gym, eating the right food. That's in my control. So I attach my self-esteem purposefully to things that I can control. And then I try to make my goal to start a conversation. So I'm going to do the very best I can to start a conversation because I can't book a meeting without starting a conversation. And it takes the pressure off. So my goal is to start a conversation and see if I can learn something insightful about this account. That's it. That's all I want to do. So I try to shorten the time frame of that goal and front load that goal a little bit more. The other thing is I try to not put so much pressure on myself to really execute the call perfectly. And I just really try to lower the stakes. One of the things that I'm really into UFC. One of the things I love is, John Jones was talking about moving up to heavyweight. He's a UFC fighter. And prior to him doing that, he was going to fight guys that were like 50 pounds heavier than him, 205 versus 265. And people were asking him, like, hey, are you scared? And he was like, honestly, like, I've kind of accepted the fact that I could get knocked out, right? Or that I could get my jaw broken. And I was like, wow, that's like radical. Like he's accepting the fact that the worst case scenario is like he could get hurt or injured. And like he's already accepted that and he's at peace with that. And I was like, what's the worst case in a cold call? The worst case is that someone hangs up on you and you feel a little awkward afterwards. Right. So like that's the worst case. So like really thinking about like the mental part of like that you associate with the work I find to be pretty helpful. Um, team, that's all I got for you. I really appreciate you guys hanging out with me and spending some time. Please download and check out the masterclass, and hopefully we'll see a bunch of you tomorrow. That's all I got. We'll see you. Have a good one, everyone.